related to the golf, because I think you can imagine your owner in the middle of a contract negotiation invites you to play a round of golf after the negotiations or really lack thereof haven't gone very well. You've heard almost nothing. Everything you've heard up to that point was, Klay, we want you back, but we just can't do it just yet. So he invites you to play a round of golf, and this was again like around May 20th-ish, mid to late May. Lacob invites him down to Pacific Palisades in Southern California, and Klay might have already been down there. Of course, a SoCal kid, and that's where his dad is, and a lot of his family is down there. But they don't talk about the contract at all. Not even broached. The subject not broached at all. Lacob doesn't bring it up. Klay doesn't bring it up. I can imagine it being an awkward situation for Klay Thompson. That was one little tidbit there. And guys, if you're already upset that your owner, that your franchise, that you helped win 4 championships for, isn't really being very receptive to your impending free agency, and then you meet the owner face-to-face for a round of golf for 18 holes, and the subject doesn't even come up, I can imagine how that would maybe piss you off a little bit more and maybe drive a wedge between you even further.
I just don't get the point of inviting him out, because
if you're not going to have that talk,
I just don't understand the point.
Even if the talk is just like, sorry, Clay, we can't do it.
Right.
But according to Ramona, Shelbourne, and Kendra Andrews, there was nothing of that sort.
It was a sign of respect, and I think at that point, it was over, Jason. It was already a wrap, and they both knew it.
How is it respectful, though, if you're not going to communicate what Klay wants? That is just, it's almost like passive aggressive. It's like, yo, come golf with me, Klay. I know, like, these are the biggest couple days of your career, probably, in the future of your career. And I know in your heart to hearts, all you want to do is be a warrior and respected and have your legacy intact. It's the only thing to talk about at this point. So I don't even know if it's like, maybe the intention was a sign of respect. I can get behind that. Misplaced, I guess. I mean, is he not well calculated?
And he was already in LA, so it's not like he flew down there just to play golf with Joe. Joe was down there. Klay was down there. Let's get together and play some golf. And I think by that point, and according to the story, it was May, so about a month ago when this all went down. And I do think that at that point, both sides knew where this was and how this was going to wind up. And so, yeah, it is a little bit odd that they didn't even like on the 13th tee, like, hey, Joe, now that we're a couple drinks in here and we were getting to know each other a little bit, what do you think? What do you think about 2 and 40? Or even if it wasn't strictly business, the fact that it didn't come up at all seems surprising to me. But I do think at that point it was already kind of a wrap.
Maybe. And it did seem like Klay felt that way, but it kind of seems like he was willing to maybe hear him out. And if he finally came with the offer, then he was going to be willing to deal with it and put those emotions behind him. But the conversation, at least according to reports, never happened. Another interesting thing from Ramona and Kendra Andrews on this ESPN story, they report that both Draymond and Klay, and this is really interesting, both Draymond and Klay weren't really sure how to feel about both Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins getting contract extensions the summer after winning the championship. So Warriors beat the Celtics, 2022 finals. You get the parade down Market Street. Everyone is ecstatic. Specifically Jordan Poole, by the way, because he knows he's about to get a new contract. He gets 4 years for $140 million. Andrew Wiggins gets 4 years for $109 million. And at that time, that might be where Klay's frustration kind of begins, because the report, again, from Shelbourne and Kendra Andrews, Ramona and Kendra, they say that both Draymond and Klay were a little frustrated that they, meaning Poole and Wiggins, got contract extensions while both Draymond and Klay did not the offseason after winning a championship.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a thing that becomes more telling than whether or not they talked business over a golf round. And that, I think, set the last couple of years in motion for Klay. That frustration over, and, Draymond felt the same frustration, and he got the frustration out in his own individual way at practice. And, that's not the way Klay did it. But you heard Klay talking about Jordan Poole when they came back from that overseas trip in the preseason, and, how Jordan Poole was starting to feel himself a little bit too much. So there was that frustration, I think, that hung around the team. And it's not only the Jordan Poole, it's the Andrew Wiggins extension, and then the fact that Draymond got $4 and $100 million. If you're Klay, you're thinking, okay, I'm in line for the same sort of a legacy contract, and when that never came, That's where the frustration grew.
But how if you're Klay or Draymond in that moment, before the Draymond extension happens, you're a year away from that extension happening. Draymond's extension that came a year ago now, not even a year ago, but right around there. Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins both had 1 year left on their deals, and they were due for extensions. Draymond also had one. Klay had 2 more years on his deal. How is someone whose time is up ahead of you frustrating you that they're getting paid instead of you got 2 years left on your deal? It's not your turn, it's their turn.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty consistent in saying we can't control or tell someone how they ought to feel. I mean, that's personal, but I didn't see it that way. I just didn't see it the way that Klay saw it. Obviously, he has more of an inside look. He has more context. He has more of a right to like have opinions on how the Warriors are handling him. But you're exactly right. It wasn't Klay's turn to get paid yet. It just wasn't. And I mean, in my opinion, Draymond was just has been a better player than him. Just objectively speaking, he has been more impactful. Look, I mean, it is what it is at this point. Klay felt a certain type of way. Clearly, the Warriors felt a certain type of way in how they wanted to proceed and how much they thought Klay was worth. Even given the context in his history, they disagreed about it, and it resulted in this. It's pretty much what it stems down to, no?
Yeah, and I think if you add in the relegation to the bench part of it and, the frustration that Klay was feeling throughout the year, all those things, including some internal frustration that he was showing, according to the Ramona Shelbourne and the Kendra Andrews piece that ran in ESPN today, there were more things than just the disrespect of not getting the contract that led Klay to feel some type of way. And then you get to the end of the year and you're a 10 seed. And I do think that that's the backdrop for all of this. You look at what happened when you're a 10 seed, something's got to change. Draymond signed and Wiggins is signed. Poole's gone, and Steph is signed. So what's the one thing that you can change? And other than making trades, it's Klay Thompson. And so you get to the end of a 10-seed year, and you want Klay to stay, but you don't want Klay to stay for 2 and 48. That deal is no longer on the table. And in fact, there's no deal on the table. It's a wait and see. And so Klay goes through everything he does. He plays almost every game last year.
77 games?
77 of 82. And the year before that, you were one of the best three-point shooters in the game, and none of that is going to warrant you getting a contract from your team? I get it.
I get the frustration too. It's even crazier because Ramona reports that not only did the Warriors not offer Klay a contract, but it was Klay's camp who had proposed multiple contracts to the Warriors, including 4 before the offseason even began, and the last one that Klay's camp offered came as recently as about a month ago, early June, when Klay's camp said, all right, Warriors, how about 2 years for about $20 million a year? 2 years for about $20 million a year, which if you were following Sunday Morning, which what Chris Haynes reported was what the Warriors offered Klay. So you got all sorts of disinformation going on back and forth. I don't know who you believe, but Ramona Shelbourne reporting, and Kendra Andrews of ESPN, that the Warriors received an offer from Klay's camp a month ago, $20 million right around there per year for 2 years. And Joe Lacob and the Warriors' response was the same. The response has been this entire process. We can't do it yet. $20 million over 2 years, or average of $20 million for 2 years.
I mean, all of that could have been avoided if Klay just accepted the 2 for 48 a couple years back.
Last offseason.
Yeah, offseason. So, look, man, we can argue, and we're not arguing, but you know what I mean. We can talk about this until we're blue in the face. The fact of the matter is they are probably better off with this course of action, both parties, because I don't think it's already been reported that Klay was miserable the past year.
Mm-hmm. And Kendra and Ramona confirmed that as well.
Yeah, it's already been reported he was miserable the last year. You don't want a guy to be miserable. Warriors don't want that. It's not beneficial to anybody. If someone is miserable at work every day, how do you think that comes off? Even if it's not intentional.
Oh, it brings everyone else down.
How do you think that comes off? Now, wouldn't you think it'd be appropriate to say that's kind of exhausting?
No doubt.
Okay, then. So why would you even want that? why would you even want that? That's all, like, you know, so it's probably better off for both sides.
Yeah, and I don't know how you would not get that Klay, even if you gave him 2 years and 48, like he probably wanted now. Even if you gave him his starting spot back, which you don't want to do, so you didn't want to give him the contract that he wanted. You didn't want to put him back in the starting lineup, which is probably what he wanted. And just judging by what was written in that piece in ESPN, he got to a point where he realized he wanted to change the scenery, no matter what. He wanted to go somewhere where he wouldn't have to try to live up to the old Klay. And that's something Mark Willard's been saying all along, the idea of, having to live up to the Klay that we all remember and the Klay that he remembers and being scrutinized here as a Golden State Warrior. And that's a big reason why he ultimately didn't go to the LA Lakers, is because the scrutiny and the fishbowl of being Michael's kid and of being in LA, and Kobe was your idol growing up, and the LA kid comes home and all the rest of it. It's a lot different than you go to Dallas. He won't have any of that in Dallas. There's pressure to win because they've won, and they're coming off an NBA Finals appearance. So if you're a Mavericks fan, you're thinking, okay, this is our standard now with Luka and Kyrie, and now you have Klay. So there's that pressure, but there's not all the extra pressure that goes with being a Warrior and with being a Laker.
Do you remember when Steve Kerr years ago now, I think he did it a number of times, but he would call Klay a zero maintenance star.
Yeah.
Zero maintenance star. And that's referenced in this article by Ramona, Shelbourne, and Kendra Andrews of ESPN, where Steve Kerr never had to worry about Klay. He was showing up, practicing, and getting all his work in. He was probably one of the first people there to the facility, and he just loved to play basketball. And he's Klay. He's kind of the weird. He's kind of got the awkward sense of humor, but he's hilarious, and all the guys love him, and they love being around him. And of course, he's a great basketball player, and is a big reason why you won all these championships. Zero maintenance, never any drama. You didn't have to worry about him at all. But it's something that you guys are both getting at. That has changed the last couple of years. And I think a piece from earlier in the week, this came out yesterday, Anthony Slater of The Athletic went through a number of instances where you easily can see that he's no longer that zero maintenance star. And again, it's not blaming Klay. I think we all can understand his frustration, but I think you can also see the Warriors side once you do fully realize the effect that Klay's emotions were having on the whole team. I'm going to just run through a couple of instances that Slater dives into from his piece, and this is all from this most recent season. You remember early December in Phoenix. This was the night that Draymond punched Yusuf Nurkic and got ejected and later on suspended, and it was that whole big thing. But another thing that happened in that game was Steve Kerr, really for the first time ever, deciding to bench Klay during crunch time. So he benches Klay during crunch time, and Klay, upset, kind of knocks over a bunch of cups behind the bench and starts, getting up and screaming at the coaches in the huddle, the whole staff, and Steph has to basically pull him out of there, pull him away. So that's like the first instance of this frustration for Klay kind of really boiling over. Fast forward to February. You remember the game at home against the Clippers. There was a comeback, and the Warriors ultimately are down by 6 with like a minute left. But Klay did not play like the previous 6 or 7 minutes.
Yep.
Steve benched him in crunch time again, and he's on the bench this entire time, kind of like stewing and thinking and getting upset and angry. And again, I don't blame him. He's dealing with his basketball mortality, and it's difficult. But then the Warriors down 6 with like less than a minute to go. They get Klay back in the game because they need a 3. They need 3 points. And Klay's still a very good 3-point shooter. Ultimately, they do make a 3. It was a Pajemski made 3, I believe, but Klay was a factor in that play. So now suddenly Warriors only down 3 with like 40 seconds left. It's a 1-possession game. So everyone in the building knows, don't foul, don't foul, don't foul. We just need to stop and we'll get the ball back. And Klay intentionally fouls the Clippers. They make free throws, and at that point, essentially the game's over. And Klay, I think it's relatively easy to just assume that his mind was elsewhere. He was kind of stewing and upset and frustrated that he wasn't in the game. And some post-game even theorized that, his head was elsewhere and he wasn't really focused on the game. And then this leads into the very next day in Utah, a back-to-back, just before the end of the All-Star break. Kerr decides to move Klay to the bench. Podziemski starting, and Klay comes off the bench as the sixth man. First time since his rookie year that he's coming off the bench. And once Steve Kerr gave that news to Klay, quote from Anthony Slater of the story, Klay ripped into Kerr and his staff, grumbling about his inevitable summer departure from the franchise. But then you get the other side of Klay, where he goes out and scores 35 points in 28 minutes coming off the bench. And post-game, he's talking about how he needs to accept his role, and he cites Manu Ginobili and his great career as the sixth man and all of that. But you can see, I think this gives you an insight into how Klay's emotions last year not only damaged, maybe his play at times, but it hurt the Warriors as a team in moments. The Phoenix or the Clippers game at home committed a foul that might have cost you that game. And you can just imagine how maybe at times it was incredibly awkward.
Wasn't in it.
And it was awkward being around Klay this season because of those public instances of being incredibly frustrating. And it was something you talked about, kind of walking on eggshells. And it's not to blame Klay necessarily. It's natural to feel that way. But on the flip side, I think the Warriors, if they had any fear that Klay was going to feel that way again, you can't possibly have that in your locker room a second time.
No, of course you can. And I mean, everybody, look, I get it. He has this nostalgia attached to him, but objectively, you can say that is not a healthy workroom environment with a player who is quote unquote miserable, which has been reported by Ramona Shelbourne and company. Like, that's just not healthy. You don't want anybody to be miserable.